dear guests, allow me to welcome you to the second section of our event. This event will consist of two basic parts. First, we'll have 3 presentations, which will be followed by a panel discussion. And first, we would like to hear from our local talent from our University Press, Faculty of Arts, which will be represented by Matevž and Eva. And I would like to welcome you to the stand, please.
Thank you very much, Damjan. So we are znanstvena založba Filozofske fakultete Univerze v Ljubljani, or as we called ourselves in English, Ljubljana University Press, Faculty of Arts. We published around 70 books per year, and in our publishing house there are 3 people employed and 2 extra in the bookstore. We also publish 14 journals, and that means 25 issues per year. We have used open journal system and open monograph press to show our work, to disseminate our articles and books that we published. Open journal system and open monograph press are also open source. That means software is for free and you can modify the code, so you can develop your own stuff and so on. It was also very important that we translated this open monograph press and partly also open journal system with the help from our Department for Translation Studies. And it's also a great help for us with Mitja Podreka from Computer Center. Open journal system and open monograph press are not only for reading and for archive, but it's also a management and publishing system behind that most users do not see. We use this publishing system for our journals, but not yet for monograph press. But I think we'll use it also in the future, because you have all the archives, you can see what is going on, all the reviews are stored in there and so on. What is important is that all this stuff is made with enthusiasm of our people. We don't have special funds for this, and also we are actually not forced to publish publication with open access, but we believe that open access is the only way for our publishing house that is suitable. Now I would like to invite my colleague Eva Vrbnjak, and she will show you these 2 sites, Open Journal System and Open Monograph Press, that we use, and she will also present some specific of these 2 sites.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. On the ebooks website of Ljubljana University Press, Faculty of Arts, 100 book titles are currently published, whose authors and editors are mostly researchers and professors at our faculty. The site allows you to choose between 2 languages, English or Slovene. Books are classified into 21 categories, the same as the number of departments of the faculty. And we have 27 different book collections. As an example, I will choose English first. As an example, let us look at the category Translation Studies and select the book Investigating Computer-Mediated Communication, edited by Darja Fišer, who will take the floor after me. At the beginning, there's a list of contributors and a brief summary of the contents. we can download the entire contents in PDF or EPUB format, which allows reading on phones and tablets. A link to our online bookstore is also available, where you can buy a book in printed edition. Other metadata, such as ISSN number, ISBN number, DOI number, date of first release, are also visible here. So in the central block, there's a range of separates of individual articles in PDF format with added titles of the article and the names of their authors, where a click on an icon allows you to read PDF. Looks like this. Below there's a chart with the number of the file downloads and the short biography of the editors. As for administration, we do not accept articles for publication. This is merely an archive site. It is done slightly differently on the journals of the Faculty of Arts website, where we publish. It's not working. Perfect. Thank you. So the site of the journals of the Faculty of Arts, we publish the contents of 14 scientific journals. Some of them are published, like Matevž said, several times a year, with a total of 25 volumes published each year. On this website, which offers choice of 12 languages, authors can register and submit their own contribution for a specific journal. While in some editions, the entire process of broadcasting and receiving contributions is made through the website. The contributions must be in line with the guidelines for authors. They're accessed here. So they are accessible to readers as separates in the PDF format, ready for downloading. The faculty's oldest scientific journal is Linguistica. This one. The first issue was released in 1955. As an example, I can show you what an issue from 1965 looked like to get an idea of the past. Here? No. Just a moment. This one. So clicking on a title of a particular article opens a subpage with a short summary. The download icon, date of publication, copyright information, and information that the work is licensed under a Creative Commons license. You can download the PDF here to read the article. And of course, newer posts also add other metadata, such as DOI number. This one here, for example. So, such as DOI number of individual articles, affiliates of authors, and keywords. Thank you very much for your attention. Damian.
Thank you much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next up is Darja Fišer, who will present to us the CLARIN initiative and open data in the humanities. Professor Darja Fišer is chair of the Unit for Lexicology, Terminology and Language Technologies at the Department of Translation Studies of the Faculty of Arts, University of Ljubljana. She teaches courses on corpus linguistics and translation technologies. As a researcher, she is currently active in the fields of computer-mediated communication and lexical semantics, using corpus linguistic methods and natural language processing. She is president of the Slovenian Language Technology Society, chair of the FOLI steering committee of the biggest European school on language logic and computation, ESLI, and director of user involvement of the European Research Infrastructure for Language Resources and Technology, CLARIN. And I kindly invite her to the microphone, please.
Hello everyone, thanks for inviting me. I'd like to start my presentation with two brief anecdotes as to why I've become a missionary of sharing language resources. The first one was when, as a junior researcher, I found this fabulous lexicon that would help me do a faster, better research for my PhD thesis. I wrote to the researcher who compiled it, and while he had no bad intentions, he was too busy to start looking into his old laptop, reconvert the formats into something that was contemporary, and send me the lexicon. So basically, after many emails, I gave up and had to start my research from scratch, which delayed my work by more than half a year, which in PhD terms, this is a lot of time. The second anecdote comes from my more recent experience when, as a mentor, as a supervisor of junior colleagues, I very often come across people starting from scratch just like I did, and they spend the bulk of their time compiling resources instead of doing actual research. And I don't think this should be the job, this should be the job of junior researchers. I think they should be furthering methodologies addressing important, increasingly complex research questions. And if there are resources already available for them to do that, they should start directly looking at those resources. And that's my job, my role at CLARIN, where I'm trying to promote the existing resources and tools the CLARIN infrastructure has available. What is CLARIN in 7 bullets? CLARIN is an acronym for Common Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure. It gained S3 ERIC status in 2012 and landmark status in 2016. CLARIN provides easy and sustainable access for scholars in the humanities and social sciences, as well as other researchers that are interested in our data. We are collecting and disseminating all digital language data in written, spoken, video, or multimodal form, and we consider language data as cultural data. Anything that is said in language is also a reflection of our culture, and that's why I think our scope goes well beyond just linguistics. In addition to the resources, we also offer advanced tools to discover, explore, exploit, annotate, analyze, and combine wherever they are located. So me as a researcher can be sitting in Ljubljana using my laptop. I can access resources from Germany and tools from the UK or France, all from the same location. Not only that, I can do this with a single sign-on environment. So I only need to register, identify myself with my university account once, and have all the services readily available for me. We organize this infrastructure into an ecosystem suitable for knowledge sharing. This is the map of CLARIN. The dark blue colors are CLARIN member countries. We have currently 20 members. The network is continuously growing. As you can see, Croatia is not yet dark blue, but the map should be updated. We also have 2 observer countries and over 40 centers in the network. Slovenia also has a national CLARIN node. The technical infrastructure is based at the József Institute. The coordinator is Tomáš Erjavec, and the Slovenian CLARIN repository has about 90 resources already. In addition, it offers tools and services in terms of concordancers to query corpora, various manual and automatic annotation tools, and advanced text processing tools. Most important players on the national level are CLARIN partners, including the University of Ljubljana, where we are today. This is CLARIN's goal. It's a bit ambitious, so we're not getting there in 1 year's time or something like that, but still I think it's very important that we say it out loud. CLARIN's goal is digital language resources and tools from all over Europe and beyond are accessible and interoperable for the support of researchers in the humanities and social sciences. Hopefully, eventually we'll get there. Through following these priorities. First and foremost, and not just because I'm speaking as the director of user involvement, but this is a priority number one by CLARIN, its uptake by researchers. There is no CLARIN infrastructure without its users. We want to outreach to all humanities disciplines through various training events, service enhancements for better user experience, and so on. A major component is our technical infrastructure that offers an integrated, interoperable infrastructure for open science. In addition to that, we take care of knowledge sharing quite seriously by offering knowledge centers, mobility grants, video lectures, and the course registry, where you can query all the digital humanities and social sciences courses together with the Darja infrastructure, our sister infrastructure. In terms of sustainability, we take care of extending to new countries, cooperating with the GLAM sector, commitments from the various stakeholders and funders, as well as cooperation with other infrastructures. We are committed to offering and promoting open science, not as a standalone facility, but as a player in making the vision in the European policies towards open science a reality by interconnecting researchers across national and disciplinary borders, by offering seamless access to data and services in line with the fair data principles that you have heard about before the break. We are findable. I will try and demo that. We offer a standard metadata format and harvesting of the metadata throughout the network. We are accessible. We use HTTP protocols and SAMLs for federated single sign-on. We also make sure that the resources are as open as possible, and when this is not the case, we carefully and explicitly describe the limitations. We are interoperable. We offer the SIMD framework and the controlled vocabularies, as well as advise users on using the standards such as the TEI. We are also reusable. We provide information on clear licensing. We offer understandable documentations, compatibility with community standards, as well as the tools. This is how our infrastructure looks like. On the one hand, in the right corner, we have the language data. So this is what researchers care about the most. And we take care that the language data are described with metadata, and based on that, we combine them with the appropriate language tools so that the language data can be suitably processed. This is done in every CLARIN repository throughout the network, and by bringing those, combining all those together, we harvest the metadata from all the repositories, we index the available catalog entries and offer metadata search in the virtual language observatory, which is like the CLARIN Google, as you could describe it in simple terms. We then offer a selection of the resources available and provide data analysis tools and services through the language resource switchboard. So you basically take one text collection or one corpus, and according to the metadata that it is equipped in, you already get a list of available tools that the network offers for your resource to process. And I will now demo briefly what the VLO is and how you can query the metadata. So this is the CLARIN VLO, so the CLARIN Google. You have simple search options and faceted search, and since it's election time, I thought maybe we could try and find a parliamentary corpus of Slovenian. You can pretend you're using Google, and you get not one but 2 hits. You can easily see the licensing information. If you click on the resource, you see the description. You can read through all the metadata available. You can go to the resource tab and immediately download the corpus itself, the data itself, without even getting in touch with the author of the resource. This saves a lot of time. It has a persistent identifier, so it's never going away, even though your research project might be over, and it provides immediate citing opportunities for the authors of the resources. You can do the same in the Slovenian National Repository. This is the Slovenian node, and you get very similar results if you scroll down a little bit. And you can, from the Slovenian repository, you can go directly even to the concordancer so that you don't even have to download the data, and you can query the corpus yourself. When you click on the corpus, at the very top of the page, you have the citation assistance so that people can be cited and credited for their work. I think that this significantly speeds up the work of individual researchers, but also makes significant progress in the community of researchers in general overall. So I think we should pay more attention also on the policy and funding levels, that we make sure that data management plans are taken into consideration with project proposals, and that the outputs of research really is stored in a sustainable way so that other researchers can benefit from that. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darja. And this takes us to our final presentation, which will touch upon the activities of the social science data archives. And this talk will be presented by Irena Vipavc Brvar and Dr. Sonja Bezjak. Irena Vipavc Brvar is an expert assistant at the Social Science Data Archives, Faculty of Social Sciences of the University of Ljubljana, where she works with researchers, data providers, and data users. She has prepared and led a number of workshops in the field of researching data management, the quality of research data, the use of domestic and international data catalogs, and more. Dr. Sonja Bezjak is employed at the Social Science Data Archives, Faculty of Social Sciences, University of Ljubljana. She is primarily engaged in the theme related to open data. She participates in the preparation and implementation of open data workshops and deals with topics related to the policies of open access to research data, citation of data, data magazines, data management plans, etc. Sonja Bezjak actively participates in training of users and donors of research data. And I kindly invite them to the microphone.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It will be mainly me speaking, but if Sonja wants to join or later on in discussion. So basically, I'll be speaking briefly today about social science data archives. We had just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year, so we are here from 1997. We are located at the Faculty of Social Sciences, but we serve as a national data repository for social sciences. So we are not institutional repository, but national repositories. In our catalog, you can find approximately 600 social science surveys with data files and additional 150 with metadata, meaning they might be older studies which have a bit of information like questionnaires, etc. We have approximately 1,200 users registered in 2017. Most of our users come from educational field, so it's something similar as Darja just mentioned. There are really many students that are looking for data, so they don't need to spend so much time doing their own collection. So it's really, a good thing for them. And about 10% come from the scientific research field. ADP is a member of CESDA. CESDA stands for Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. We became ERIC in 2017, but organization exists for probably more than 40 years. It was previously kind of non-official organization with different service providers, so to say, different archives. Currently, there are 17 data archives from social sciences that are partners in this consortium. ADP also, at the end of last year, gained a trusted data repository certification, today called Core Trust Seal. So those that know might know previous name is Data Seal of Approval and combination of different, so now it's called Core Trust Seal. So we are certified now. And we are involved in many European projects. This is a picture I borrowed from one of our colleagues from CESDA SO project that we took part in last 3 years. So basically what we can see in this picture is kind of combination of what's actually assets of data archives. So basically we do have and we do distribute intellectual capital, so data that are there. We do have skills, so the human capital, skills and training. We put a lot of efforts into training, into accessing files and other services. We built professional networks, meaning that through the data discovery workshops that we might have, we just have one of the webinars on migration, and we have one of the workshops in Prague at the end of the year. We kind of join researchers in different fields and we help them how to find data on a specific topic across Europe. And we also have an organizational capital. This is a graph that came from a survey on user satisfaction that we did in 2016. Out of 521 answers that we received, and this is multiple response. So mostly the data files are used for the course papers, so what kind of seminars that you would do normally during the education. Then we have about 40% said that they're using this for diploma, master thesis, and then there's a quite huge amount also said research projects, and then for preparing scientific and professional publications. Just a brief also from this study. Most of the respondents find ADP contributes to the development of scientific Slovenian science, and the materials and services provided by ADP largely support users' work or study. So it's really important that they have access to the data file. So when we are talking about access, we need to refer to data publication. So when we have journal publication and we have data publications that we need to mention. Just as it said, it's expected that the data publication will ensure the data will potentially be considered as a first-class research output. So we are here dividing publishing with a so-called capital P and publishing with a small p, meaning that when we say capital P, when we are referring to properly documented data with a metadata, so they need to have metadata in order to be used. They are reviewed for quality, so they are not just deposited somewhere, but there's an editorial, so to say, committee at the back that actually review the quality of these. And they're searchable and discoverable in the catalogs. So we also have a catalog similar than CLARIN, and they are citable in articles, which is really important. And we are talking when we are talking about publishing with a small p, there are no guarantees that the data will be there for some time. So you might publish it on the webpage of the project. You might have a license for domain for another 5 years. After that, it's a bit tricky where it will be, etc. So it's really important that you think about publishing in the repository. So different publishing routes that we recognize in one of the expert guide that we prepared as a CESDA archives on data management. And there are possibility of journalist supplemented material services, so as a data file that would go directly with the journal. Then we have institutional data repositories, which are not common in Slovenia or not at all. And then we have general purpose repositories, which some disciplines might find useful. And then we have the main specific data repository as it is ADP, and some of these might be trusted or not, so this additional. So just to say why publish with CESDA archive, why this is important. As we said, we have a trusted domain-specific directory repository, so we are dealing with social science data. They are accessible, findable, visible, so all these FAIR principles that we already heard today are there. And it's also important that they are accessible for the long period of time. Just to mention, the oldest data file that we have in the archive came from 1968, and you can imagine before 90s there were few computers, before 70s everything was on a punch card, so everything needed to be converted in order to be accessible today. And I would just like to finish with this slide. So ADP was involved in 2011 in the project that we call Open Data. And one of the results of that was the action plan for establishing a system of open access to research data funded by public sources. So we actually conducted 22 interviews in 17 different disciplines. And on the basis of this and other different ideas and work, then government put together a national strategy for open access to research publication, and then we also have an action plan. And there are two related legislation to this, one that will come into existence or pushed just now in a few days, so General Data Protection Regulation, and one that I guess will be changing in next year is Research and Development Activity Act. So one of the things that the Darja really mentioned is, and we really see that whenever we talk to different researchers, the data management plan is really the thing that is the most important. If you start thinking about managing your data at the beginning, it's whenever you deposit it later on, it's makes life really simple. So this is a short, because I know that we are all waiting for the roundtable, so I'll not prolong it anymore. Yeah, thank you.
thank you very much for your presentation. Are there perhaps any questions to any of our presenters so far? If not, this concludes our first section, and we are moving on to the second segment, the panel discussion. Discussion, and we've been joined by two experts, further two experts who have a lot to say on this matter. The first one is Dr. József Györkös, head of the National Research Agency. Professor Györkös is the director of the Slovenian Research Agency from November 2014, and he's a university professor in the area of computer science and informatics at the University of Maribor, Faculty of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. Furthermore, he has been member and chair of the EU Connect Advisory Forum in ICT Research and Technology. He is a member of the National Task Group for the Open Access at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport of the Republic of Slovenia. And we've also been joined by Dr. Meta Dobnikar, who is heading the science unit at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport of the Republic of Slovenia. Dr. Meta Dobnikar started her career at the University of Ljubljana, Faculty of Natural Sciences and Engineering, where she worked as a researcher and teacher at the Department of Geology for almost 20 years. Within this time, she headed the chair for mineralogy and petrology for 5 years and the Department of Geology for 2 years. In 2009, she took the position of the head of Higher Education Unit at the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology. In 2013, she continued her work at the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport at the Science Unit, where she took the position of the head of the Science Unit in July 2015. And I think we should start off with some general background on the regulation dealing with open access in Slovenia. And I think that nobody is better suited to present this general background and the basic tenets that the Slovenian regulation on this matter has imposed. And maybe you, Dr. Dobnikar, could start off by saying what the national strategy, about which we've heard something today already, has to offer, what are its basic tenets, and what criteria do we have to meet in the future?
Thank you. Regarding the national strategy, it was adopted in 2015, and also the action plan was already adopted. And the action plan actually is the one that is really detailed, with all the steps we need to take, with institutions that are responsible and the money needed to implement the national strategy. I would like to stress that as legal background is concerned, the new act on research was something that should be accepted this year, but it was stopped just at the end because of the reasons that are well known to all of us. So this is something where we are now a bit lagging behind regarding the legislation. The most important goals of the national strategy is, of course, 80% of openly accessible publications funded from national funds in 2018. This is a bit tied to our agency and their demands within their calls for, of course, publishing in open access all the research that is financed by national funds. Maybe Dr. Györkös will say something about this, how close we are to this goal further on. And of course, the next goal is to have 100% openly published research funded from national funds. So I think we are a bit lagging behind, but this is the way to go. And I think the ministry at the moment is taking on also the pilot project on open data. The working group has been established, so we are taking these steps ahead. And I think the legislation also will be our next task. I have to mention also not just the act on research, but also the law on personal data protection was to be accepted, but was stopped in April. And also the law on authors' rights is important and has to be changed to comply with the open access steps.
Thank you very much. Dr. Györkös, could you explain to us to what extent can we expect the tenets from the national strategy on open access to be implemented by 2020?
Yeah, so thank you for your invitation. And you should always read the manual first. So I didn't know that this discussion is going to be in English, but I'll try to do my best. So before I start to talk about the open access and the National Research Agency for our guests, maybe I should tell a few words about the Slovenian Research Agency. It's the Research Council of Slovenia. It's the only research agency in Slovenia, and we are funding the science, all the science in Slovenia. So it means that the budget is quite significant, never enough, but we are funding all 6 disciplines. We are trying to cover, of course, the core funding in some way. We call it program funding, and also the project, the competitive funding. And beside of these 2 major activities, there is also a Young Researchers program, which share of which one is approximately 20% in the whole budget, and of course different infrastructural activities, and also the open access is in some way in our internal classification. It maybe sounds a bit strange, but it is one of the important infrastructural activities. So what are we doing in this context? We started to operate in this area in full power in this spring. Actually, we have a new co-worker, and she's taking care about this area. It was really an important obstacle for us that we hadn't had the opportunity to start with the operational part of the national strategy earlier. Even we mentioned it all the time. But let me, before I answer to your question, present the complete ecosystem in which the open access to publications and to data appears. From the aspect of the agency, of course, we are dealing also with scientific periodical publications. We are paying for them in Slovenia approximately 3.5 million euro, quite a significant sum of funds. Then we have different expert bodies for bibliographies, for example. Then we are paying for services like Web of Science and elsewhere, and so on. And all this we look like one ecosystem at the agency. Namely, we are also members of the Science Europe. And Science Europe is it's an organization, let's say, which joins mostly research funding organizations in Europe. From the United Kingdom, we just lost 5 members and got 1, actually 6, because there's the new United Kingdom Research Institute and no research council, it used to be. So, but let me return to the Science Europe. We are quite critical to open access, not as itself, of course, we do not challenge the concept at all. We are in favor of the concept, but when it comes in relation with the publications and the big publishers, we need to be very careful. And what is missing in Europe is the joint approach of all national, not just research councils, but also ministries, governments, let me say. Because now the situation is that all the publishers are discussing which single states, single governments, and we are not allowed to disclose this agreement. So there is no joint approach, and we never know if we are winners or losers. But nevertheless, here we are, and in our call for research projects, for example, and for research programs, we clearly noted the requirement that all publications that are related to the research should be published in open access. It was, let me say, I know that at the ministry you are not very satisfied with this formulation that we used until now, but in next call in July it will be more strict. Of course, that's a promise, really. But what's the problem? The problem is, what are the consequences? How can we make any sanctions if someone is not publishing in open access? That's the big question for us. And of course, there are some ideas in the instrument, but sanctions and control is never popular. But we are one of those organizations which has in its description of work at least in the amount of 1/3. We are very serious about open access. We are carefully looking at Slovenian repositories. We are very happy to hear about the projects in European research infrastructures. We are even funding them. So that I'm, let me say, quite optimistic, but at the same time very careful about the publishers. Thank you.
Okay. But if you had to venture a guess, could you project at what time will the Slovenian publishing production reach to 80% of open access? Would that projection be possible?
I think it is possible. Namely, almost all the publications are open access. It depends then on these details about which some of the colleagues I see in the audience can say much more. If it is golden access, it's green, or it's hybrid, but almost all the publications I think are going to be in open access. So it will be not a question, open access, yes or not, but at what cost?
Okay, thank you. So on the one side we have policy and matters of principles, and on the other we have actual researchers doing the work and actual research institutions that have to live with those rules and policies. Matevž, could you perhaps offer an insight into what our faculty is trying to do and how we're coping to answer to all these demands and calls for open access?
Well, we seriously started to think about open access actually in 2015 when this national strategy appears in Slovenia. So it was a waking call for us, but at the same time we got frightened that suddenly Slovenian research agency will say, okay, what we found, what we give you money for the books and for the journals, it has to be open access immediately. But we didn't have any infrastructure, so we started on our own, as most publishers did here in Slovenia. So we were not connected, we were not knowing if we were doing the right thing and so on. We did what we could, as you saw those two portals. And this is, I think, something that we can do by ourselves. All these portals are, I can say, locally. They are more local than international. It should be international. It can be, and everybody will benefit from it. But I think all publishers have to step together, or ministry, or some national strategy has to be more concrete what and how to do with these open access articles and books. So as I said, we done what we could, and now we will see what will be going on.
Speaking as the head of our university press at the faculty, could you say that open access also proved to be detrimental to the university press in pure monetary terms? How do you respond to issues that arise from the lack of the influx of funding, actually? How do you respond to those issues and challenges?
Yes, open access costs. So there's a lot of work we put into these portals. We did not fund it by specific funds, so we just did on our spare time. Let's say so. So it does cost. Most people say, well, open access, you just put PDF on internet and that's it, and you even don't have to print the book, so you save the money, which is not true. So that is one thing. And the second thing I would like to point out that most of our researchers are very fond of open access. They are very happy that the book or the article is published online immediately, and they do share it with other researchers and so on. So we do not have any problems with researchers that say, oh no, I don't want to put this open access, but there are all, and I think really all very fond of open access, which is a good thing, and it helps us.
One question: if we have a number of brilliant researchers here, so when somebody gets a European project, do they find it difficult to address all those needs and basically goals and requirements that are required of them to meet in terms of open access?
Yes and no. I mean, we can do basically basic stuff. We can put PDF on the web, which is this basic demands that researcher have. But we could do more with this, and we do not know. For the newer project now, we have one big project, and we'll see how it works. We have to deal with all legislation and so on, and we'll see how it goes. But as I said, for now, basic stuff we can do, but it stays, I'm afraid, local and not international.
Do you think that some infrastructural support would be much needed, or?
Yes. I think something if I mean, Slovenia is small, but if we join all our work together, it can be much stronger voice in international.
And if we look at this idea and the overwhelming sense of preparedness among people to take on these open access issues, do you think, Dr. Györkös, that the humanities could take on a pioneering role in this process of going full open access? Do you think that it's basically easier for us who do research in the humanities than for perhaps some other researchers from other fields?
When we speak about the open access to research data, I think that humanities and social sciences are in some way advanced in Slovenia. Of course, also in natural sciences, there are different databases and available data which are maybe not, or sometimes maybe randomly accessed, but they exist. So that this care for repository and the importance of the working group is very big. So as you mentioned, Meta, this is a working group working on a pilot, and I think that they can use all the best practices from SH. So there are, for example, in engineering or natural sciences, some difficulties even in the medicine if we go through all the fields of science. Namely, the data is often related to type of equipment, and you need to maintain the whole facility, not just the data themselves. But these are questions for experts, and they will need to answer it. But I think that also the culture of keeping data when you publish them is in last years very high. However, we can read about different retentions and so on, just because of that reason. But I think that maybe this was an unfinished statement, but anyway, maybe we shouldn't be too idealistic because I think that we cannot encompass a very large area. Namely, in our classification, for example, at the agency, we have the typical 6 fields of sciences, Frascati, like, and then 72 subfields. And each of these subfields could have its own repository for data. That needs to be clear. But I think that it's maybe an observation from the side that again we are going to be faced with some big monopolies who will offer very good services for almost no money at the beginning, but big gains in a few years. So it's just a private observation.
I was also thinking about patents, for instance, because we have a lack of patents in the humanities, and is that an advantage for us? Could we use this to our advantage to maybe further this field for our own field?
It's a very big discussion if we open this question. Of course, there are not so many patents in humanistics and social sciences, but at the use of patents, we can have very interdisciplinary projects. It's maybe then on innovation or technological level, not on research itself. So I wouldn't disclose humanistics and social sciences from the patent. But patents, really, they are specific, and mostly for engineering and natural sciences. They require special attention because if you register the patent, it is 10% of the job and 10% of the impact of this patent, maybe. So it is very hard to evaluate. In our evaluation schemas at the agency, of course, we pay quite a big attention to patents, but we still try to keep, in consultation with scientific council, we try to keep the clear picture between the different disciplines.
Thank you. And you've mentioned the pilot project, which is of course very important for the development of open access in Slovenia. Could you perhaps, Dr. Dovnikar, explain to us what will be the further timeline of its adoption, of its implementation, when we can expect to see the first results and so on?
The pilot is going on 4 fields of science, in social sciences and humanities. The reason was already mentioned why in this field. In medicine and biotechnology. So I think there is only one meeting of the working group, the first one. We started a bit late. We were waiting for some nominations of the stakeholders. We try to keep on the good practice that worked good in the preparation of action plan and national strategy. We try to involve all stakeholders, work with all stakeholders, so that the results should be acceptable for all. It's a bit hard to speak on exact dates at the moment. But I think that the first results, at least in way of ideas, should come out at the end of the year, approximately. But it's a bit not very convenient time to speak on the future of policy decisions.
So basically, regulation and the executive have a large influence on the adoption of regulation, and it's critical to be in a stable environment for you to produce anything.
Yes, it's always, a stable environment is always needed, although the work can go on anyway, but as long as we are speaking on the pilot project, there are no obstacles for the development of the pilot project. Where I cannot say it's an obstacle, but the decisions or the actions that will lean on a new act, on new regulations, this is a bit unpredictable to say when can we implement this.
Of course. And what would you say is the most important aim of the final result that this pilot project will bring about?
As far as I understand this pilot project, it should prepare a model of in a way, how the open data can be, how the research data can be openly accessible for different disciplines. So in our environment, because it's important also where you're working. So I think that this would be the major goal of this pilot project. So we can then build on other disciplines as well.
Of course. And can we expect also policy changes on the national level, Dr. Györkös? Will that be? Is that expected? Will the national agency also maybe tighten the rules regarding open access, or harmonize
I
them.
would look at this in affirmative way. Tightening means to say to have more to offer in open access. So that's the reason we have a very good background, a legal background for this. The national strategy on the action plan is something that lives and that is exposed to changes. Also, sometimes we have different views, but sometimes maybe you can feel some skepticism from the agency. It is related just to the feasibility and to nothing else. I'd like to stress this because there are shortages in staff, in funding. It is now much better thanks to this government which is fading out. So that, as I mentioned earlier, there is no such a big problem. As regards this research data, almost all the agencies, also other agencies in Europe, require by the project so-called research data management plan, similar like in Horizon 2020. It is not obligatory yet, but it is good so that we can, I think that these potential research data management plans are very good input also for the work of this working group. They can, at the end, this will be a structure of meta data, of course, and so that if you need it, if you want to understand it, you have a possibility to understand it. But I would leave the word also to the colleagues.
So maybe we should ask our colleagues for examples of good practices and, of course, bad practices, which we can hopefully avoid. So maybe you could share an observation or two about how to go about this.
Thank you. Well, speaking personally as a researcher, I think my biggest disappointment was to discover that open access had become a question of enforcement, of policy, or a question of business. I mean, it was a bit for me like the loss of innocence. You know, an academic who thought that I was doing something for a reason, and then I discovered that life was not like that, and it was about something else. And I think what we are, in general, doing wrong all over the place, from Colombia to Ottawa, from Northern Europe to Southern Central Europe, everywhere, is to make it a top-down thing. We are not exciting people with open access. I mean, I think open access starts at undergraduate level, if not at primary school or the equivalent. I think our policy should be about reorienting publicly funded research towards the public good once again. Of course, that requires a very complex process, and I am not in any way dismissing the very hard work required. It needs to be done. But I think that the most important job that is often overlooked is advocacy among students and researchers. The motivation to do things. And implementation follows the motivation. What we need is an integration of all the so-called stakeholders. But I think we need to speak the language of researchers and students, which is the why do we do what we do. And I think that it's very it can very quickly guide us to take us to be jaded and depressed about the whole thing. It has become a bureaucratic process of which librarians don't want to know about because they are under-resourced and suddenly they have more things to do. Academics that didn't have to think about things in the past, suddenly they have to think about research data management and repositories, and some academics have never heard the word repository before. Many academics in top-notch universities in the United States of America don't know what a repository is. It's a foreign language. You say repository, what? Therefore, things like Facebook and ResearchGate and academia.edu are winning the battle. Sci-Hub is winning the battle because it has made it seamless, or apparently seamless, without the hard work, right, and the hard thinking behind. So I think key stakeholders to get, not idealistic but pragmatic, are librarians. So librarians are, as I said in my presentation earlier, the bank, more than funders, more than governments, because they are the ones that are administering the, why did we end up with open access? Because of the serials crisis. From 1986, libraries, starting with Harvard, they are like, we cannot pay these prices. Subscription prices to journals have been, 400% on top of inflation since 1986. What legacy private, for-profit publishers have done with open access is that they have inverted the model. They were charging us through our libraries to access research that we did as part of our jobs, funded by the government or in a combination of funding sources. When they realize, there is a need to make things open access, which means there is no paywall, they don't want to lose their profits. So what they do is that they charge you an average of £2,500 per APC. They inverted the model because they don't want to lose out. We are talking about people think that there is no money in publishing, which is absolutely not true. Basically, we have missed the point that basically publishing and academic publishing, scientific publishing has become one of the most profitable industries. It's almost like oil. It is. I mean, we think that we are, there's no money in books. No, maybe the money is in scholarly publishing, scholarly data, right? So when we say that data is the new fuel, we are also talking about research data. 900 billion is the profit margin. That was 2018 figures for Elsevier, because that includes the indexing services and the metrication, right? So where can change be? In librarians that can decide, or can try to decide, or can try to liaise with those who matter about how to spend their money. Do we want to keep paying for subscriptions? Or maybe can we just reroute some of those funds towards our own infrastructure, towards researcher-led or academic-led projects that are using open source? But it doesn't stop there. One question on Twitter, when I was live tweeting this, was about, so are people in Slovenia or in Ljubljana, are they encouraged to publish in those lesser known journals? So that's what takes us to the other stakeholder. It has to be the research officers and people that do the academic appraisals and research funders that stop asking for people to publish with the same journals that get the infinite impact factors because they are measuring themselves. Unless we do that, people will keep publishing in the same journals, and then they go and cry because I can't pay £2,500 for an APC, but they want to publish in that journal. We need to stop wanting to publish in those journals. In order to stop wanting publishing in those journals, we need to be rewarded for not publishing in those journals. We cannot be saying we have the university press and not reward people for publishing in Slovenian in the university press in Slovenia. People need to be valued for doing that instead of publishing in a for-profit publisher. So we have the librarians who have the money to decide on what to invest. We have the research people that are colleagues here. It's us. It's us. I am part of a research center. And when I have research meetings and we have to assess each other what we're going to submit to the research assessment, we need to not tell each other, but this is an unknown journal. Where is the impact factor? We need to stop doing that. I think it's crucial because that will help policy easier in a way. Because then we are not struggling. But what is the problem? That those guys are lobbying in Washington, they are lobbying in Brussels, to get the infrastructure. And we are all too polite, too liberal to say the truth, that those guys have the money to lobby to get the infrastructure. So I think that if we want open access, we really, what open access is supposed to do. If we want researcher-led infrastructures, university-led infrastructures, we need to fund them instead of funding the private sector, and we need to reward it, recognize it. If we are going to sign the San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment that says do not take into consideration the H index and the impact factor, then those organizations and those people who signed it need to enforce it. Because yes, then they are, yes, I support that the impact factor, I recognize it's not valid, it doesn't work. But then you go to the research centers, to the departments, and they are still being assessed for that. So I know it's tough, because if you are one of those academics that gets the publications in there, and you know how difficult it is, and you struggle, rejection, and those rejections include being published in your local journal, and then like, oh, this is an unknown journal. No, it's not an unknown journal. It's not an unknown publishing university press. It is the university press of this country, funded by everyone. So I think that is, one of the things that I would like to see, exciting people to want to make that change. But if we go back to the lab, we go back to the library, and we keep dreaming again with publishing with Springer, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, in English, and I am a native speaker of Spanish. I know, I have abandoned my mother tongue. My stuff that is published in Spanish doesn't count me for anything where I am. It doesn't exist. My scholarship in Spanish before I came to the UK, it's nil. It's like I died and I was born again. My research does not exist, and I deposit in repository as a PDF. It's in another language, it's in a PDF, it didn't have a DOI, the journal was only on print. What's that? I wasted my time. It's sad, isn't it? So I think it's very important that we try to change how we're doing things, but at grassroots level.
Thank you. Maybe something to add? Difficult to add something to what Ernesto just said, because I totally agree with everything that has been said. Just try to follow up in the same direction. I think that the word that you didn't say, but that was at the heart of all your intervention, is values. So I just want to come back to why do we do what we do, and particularly why open access is important, because it's also primarily a question of values. And I think that to get back to the subject of this day, which is humanities and social sciences, and more particularly humanities, I think that our disciplines have a specific role to play in that. Why? Because you all know that the knowledge that is produced by researchers in those disciplines, of course, they address mainly and primarily the societal challenges. The main challenge that we face as European countries, for example, they are not so much technological, in fact. They are really mainly societal, political, question of identity, question of nations, question of social divide, for example, inequality. So there is a mission, there is a role for our disciplines to address those challenges, to help our societies to understand better what's going on and to find their solution, okay, to improve the situation. And that's where open access is so much important for our disciplines. Because all the knowledge that we produce must be accessible, not only for the colleagues and the researchers for the evaluation sake, but for the evaluation assessment tasks, but also, and I would say primarily, to the society itself to benefit from all this research. Otherwise, it's useless. All what we do is completely useless. If it's just to assess ourselves, it's completely useless. So And I think it's also an answer to go in the same to follow up on what you said. It's also an argument to defend the diversity of publications in our disciplines. What you said, not only the top-ranked international, so-called international journals owned by big commercial publishers, but the diversity of journals across those different universities and countries. Because, in fact, they address the needs of their community, the need of their society. That's why we publish in different languages and not all in English. That's why we have such a diversity of publications that address specific challenges, specific needs of the societies. We need this diversity. So people from South America, they invented a word for that, bibliodiversity. So that's what we need. And bibliodiversity, of course, is crushed by the assessment exercise that reward only the top level publications. So you see, it's all linked, in fact. Bibliodiversity, defense of humanities and social sciences, I should say, or I shouldn't say, but I say it, against the domination of STM disciplines in terms of funding. And of course, promotion of open access, because it's the only way for the humanities and social sciences to show that they are useful to the society and to have this constant interaction with society. So that's what I want to say, but it's the same as you said.
Do we have time to add? I just want to tell a story briefly that maybe because you asked about good practices or bad practices, and a preprint that we published late last year was about the case of, the National University of Mexico has had publishing a university press for years. The National University of Mexico is the biggest in Latin America. Big tradition in university press publishing. Also pioneers in open access. And suddenly, 43 journals published by the university are all transferred to, guess who? Elsevier. So they can be indexed on it's Web of Science, right? And then some colleagues, unrelated to our project, did a follow-up on that preprint in a properly published peer-reviewed study, in which they studied what had happened to those journals that went there, because the rationale for the officers at the university in Mexico that decided to give away all this heritage of the university and the nation and the continent to for-profit third party was that it would increase the visibility of Mexican research, right? We would make it to the Premier League, to the Champions League. And this article discovered that the fact that they were indexed in Web of Science had not made any change, any significant change whatsoever to the visibility of those journals. So we merely gave them away. But nothing happened. But obviously, they did gain this. I think that contract has ended now, and now those journals are floating there. In terms of research data management, it's a nightmare, because now they need to retract all that content, and God knows when that will happen. So I just hope that is not something that happens to more university presses, that they are underfunded and they feel like they need to outsource everything to those who can do it. And as Pierre explained in his presentation earlier today, there's only a few players who can do absolutely everything. A network like the one, an infrastructural, diverse network like the one presented by the project Opera, those signal that it is possible to work in. Obviously, it is a logistic conundrum. It's very difficult to achieve, but it can be done. So I'm very optimistic, also because we have good advocates in government that understand that it is a danger. We don't want to give everything that a nation does away to a third party that will just make profit from it while we work for free.
you. Well, before we open the discussion to the public, perhaps just a few concluding remarks. Perhaps, Dr. Györkös, if you could tell us how we can bridge this gap, maybe how we can work in this environment and work within or between the societal needs on the one hand and, of course, the needs of our assessment and industry on the other.
Very tough question. And Ernesto challenged us, of course. We are using bibliometrical data, of course, at the agency. The ERC is using bibliometrical data, directly or indirectly. But there is one interesting thing that, at least during my mandate, we reduced the importance of quantitative data significantly. But it stayed very important by research organizations, for example, at the universities and so on. There's even an anecdote when we abandoned one of these indicators. It was called A2, yes, something for citations. We received a number of calls. Where is now A2? We need for habilitations. What's this now? So that it's a very tough question, and we would really need a magic stick, you know, because there is no time for conversion. I think it's so mutual process, and also a lot of those people who signed or have in mind all the time the San Francisco Declaration play this game because there is no other choice. So I'm how to say, follow all these activities and see what can be done. But in some way, also when we speak about the evaluation at the agency, we need something to measure. Of course there are peer reviews, and we are using peer reviews. The problem is that suddenly everybody started to use peer reviews. And the researchers are doing maybe more peer reviews tasks than research. That's also an anecdote, but not far from the truth. And so that this research evaluation, I think that needs a new approach. I leave you with this observation.
Thank you. And I think Darja has something to add, please.
Yes, thank you very much. In addition to what we have heard in terms of open access publishing, I think if a research agency adds a field research data management plan to project proposals as a strategic goal, right, as a strategic orientation, I think the responsible way of doing it is in parallel to adding one small field to project proposals would be to offer to researchers two things. One is credit for the resources created, because it takes at least as much time to create a resource as it does to write an impact factor journal paper. And two, training into how to do research data management plan in a good way. Good practices in our community are not only lacking, but I would say missing altogether in coming from individual researchers. Thank you.
Any other questions, perhaps? Comments?
Yeah, I have I'm just joining into your comment that there's supposed not to be only a stick for the researcher, but also a carrot in the terms of offering credits to researchers in the research proposal for research data and also open access publications, both of them. So the carrot and the stick is a way to do it. But my comment goes more into a question about the recent developments in open access big deals, or how would you comment, the Slovenian part of the roundtable, how do you comment on the number of states that step out of the big deals with the publishers? The number is rising now, Sweden in the last one in May. So you mentioned at the beginning of the roundtable there is no joint approach in the European Union towards the commercial publishers. I would say there are some reasons towards it. The lobbying at the European Union level is much stronger from the commercial fields than is from the side of the researchers and the librarians. but some countries are more courageous, I would say so. So how would you comment from the Slovenian side of the game? We are paying, as you said, 3.5 million euros, 3.4 or 3.5 million euros to big deals, and I'm not claiming that we need to be courageous as those countries, because I think that the researchers would kill us if they won't have the access to those databases. But at least I think that the joint approach, as you said at the beginning, is much needed at this point. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, as I mentioned earlier, there are countries who can afford all these risks, and because they have always the back plan or contingency plan, and they still have access to these journals. And where I see the problem, I'd like to stress this again, when they finally agree with the publisher on conditions, these conditions are not disclosed because the nature of the contracts. But we as an agency appear here just those who publish the core, and the consortia are doing the negotiations. And here are some colleagues in the audience. I see Miro there and Dunya and others who can give you more exact answers than I'm doing. I'm always just stating the question, could we do it for less funds? Could we get more for these funds? Because we are really taking care about literature because it is needed. And there was a crisis also in this field for some years. So that maybe if you will invite someone else or make another discussions, there are some people who can answer to these questions more exactly.
Can I maybe try to describe my point of view of this issue, because it's very important question. And as I know, we are talking about two countries now. Sweden is the last case. They cancel a big deal with Elsevier. I can say for Germany, Elsevier is very smart. They switch on, back, and they switch off, and then they switch on access free of charge. The reason is not because they are so generous. The reason is because they are afraid of, let's say, a conclusion that we can live without Elsevier. The Germany can live without Elsevier. So I'm at this point, I'm not very sure. I mean, it's a bit confusion because, you know, for example, we have Finland. They did a deal, 5 years deal, big deal with Elsevier with 50% discount on APCs for I don't know 1,500 titles, and we have to think about. I think that the only way for small countries are affected more than biggest one. Slovenian output is 6,000 articles. This represents 3 promilles of all output in Elsevier. And Germany output is 160,000 articles. That means that them starting points to talk with Elsevier are much better than Slovenian. And if they do a better deal based on this output, and this is absolutely Elsevier interest because they are very important for them, much than Slovenia, for example. Slovenia will be affected, and the gap between Slovenia and Germany will be bigger. So I think that the joint policy, that a very common approach to those publishers is the only way. My idea is I have a solution for European Commission and for European Science Foundation, but it's very probably that they wouldn't listen to me. One solution is to accept the law, to simply accept the law and to cut those publishers and those publishers' policies, which are absolutely unacceptable for research budgets. But the second is very important discussion about those, let's say, new approach in evaluation systems as DORA, San Francisco Declaration or Leiden Manifesto, etc. I think the key is research evaluation. because if the research evaluation systems would be changed into the direction that not the impact of journals, but the impact of research work, which is now published in journals, are the most important metric, then we can play with such, as you mentioned, university press, new titles, repositories, founders as publishers, etc., etc. This is the key. And I think that Slovenia, once again, so small country, are not able to change this only because, you know, we are a small fly and we sit on a big elephant. But Europe is big enough to change this. So I think that when Slovenia stepped into European community, we expected those things was probably the most important for us to do this political decision. Now I think that European Commission with those policies and let's say actions toward, for example, in Horizon 2020 tender, etc., supports policies of publishers and restrictions, or I think I would say requirements are not targeted to publishers but to researchers. So what we want to do with those policies, what those policies do, those policies keep the level of revenues and the level of profits for researchers, or even increase those profits. So this is unacceptable for us. So I think the most important issue right now is how to use new technology, new communication, information and communication technology, and switch from classical models of evaluation system to some new, to exclude those influence of commercial publishers. We can cancel Elsevier today if research community here in Slovenia agree with that. But on the end of the day, we got many objections why we cancel this, because on the end there is a content which is important for researchers. So it's not very simple to discuss about that, but yeah, I think that it could be also a good lecture for us what happened around. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Perhaps. Well, this concludes our panel discussion. Thank you for attending, and thank you, our panelists.